Welcome to my channel. Let's relearn the easy way. Friends, please do like and subscribe my channel for the upcoming video. Friends, today we are going to discuss about business letter. Friends, if you work in a business, whether you are self-employed or a part of a big company, professional writing skills are essential if you want to get ahead. Poor writing is unprofessional, both on a personal and a business level, and can easily be the difference between make or break, as business letters are always treated as written documents that are important to a business deal or a situation. A business letter is a formal document often sent from one company to other, or from a company to its clients, employees, and stakeholders. For example, business letters are used for a professional correspondence between individuals as well. Friends, although email has taken over the most common form of correspondence, printed out business letters are still used for many important, serious types of correspondence, including reference letters, employment verifications, job offers, and many more. One more important aspect is that the students who would like to get engaged into business and trades in future need to learn how to keep in touch with the merchants by the correspondence. So they need to have an effective business letter. They need to develop the skills to draft effective business letters. Working on an effective polished business letter can be easy task as long as you adhere to the established rules of the layout, because business letters are essential documents for the employees. Why it is so much important for an employee? Friends, we all know that every great organization will be just that, organized. But need to understand that a part of being organized includes having documents and processes on hand for each and every situation that could potentially arise. An organization with a specific process and pre-written documents on hand will rarely find themselves blindsided without the resources. Specifically, the hiring process and subsequent tenure of an employee requires many documents for personal, professional, and legal reasons. Here, there are actually a number of things which you need to keep in mind when it comes to knowing how to write a business letter. Friends, understanding business letter formats is critical. It's not only need to understand the standard business letter formats, but also more focus should be given on to less known things such as the principal elements and the optional elements, the protocols or the rules to be followed when writing a business letter, when particularly if your correspondence contains formal or sensitive information. Hence, it lot depends upon how do you structure it, and the principal elements along with the optional elements can make a huge difference in structuring your business letter. So let's discover these building blocks of the business letter. Most of the business letters have 7 standard elements, as we know. But here we need to answer a question: why do we write a business letter? So here it goes. Most of the business letters are written with an intention of getting the reader's attention or response. You write your business letter with a clear purpose, making those letters error-free, friendly, and pertinent. All the business correspondence should be on a company letterhead, and form the rest of the business letter is standardized. All the business letters have the following elements. Basically, a professional business letter format typically includes a letterhead, date, inside address, salutation, body of the letter, the main content, complimentary clause, and the signature. Let's try to understand each and every component. Now, first the letterhead. So before going into the details, we need to understand why letterhead is important. Friends, a letterhead is the heading, usually at the top of the paper or the stationery. It typically includes the company's logo, name, address, contact information. Therefore, a well-designed letterhead acts like a company pad that makes letter look much more formal and professional. People often assume that only big corporations employ letterheads to communicate between the two parties. However, the truth is that business of all sizes, whether it is a small or an individual company or a large corporation, they use letterheads for their business letters. So these are the typical factors which are essentially required to be a part of a letterhead: name, postal address, telephone number, fax, email ID, and the website. Here we can type this letterhead, but it is recommended that we should use a pre-printed stationery, and the letterhead is used only for the first page if the business letters contains multiple pages. Letterhead plays a very major role as it can serve the important aspects such as basic introduction of the company. It becomes a legal document. It includes professionalism. It can act as a salesperson and can manage customers' persuasion. It can act as a marketing tool. Customers are pleased if they are regarded formally. Therefore, the business letter is inherently formal in itself, and hence a letterhead can induce a sense of professionalism at a higher scale. Therefore, we are recommended to use a letterhead. Let us see an example. Here you can see a typical example which contains the company logo. You can have the detailed name of the company with the postal address as well as the phone number, email ID, and the respective website of the company. Moving on to the next aspect, date line. Friends, indicating the date the letter was written is much important for keeping the records for the legal purposes. Here, the date line is 2 inches below the top of the page, and depending upon the format used for the letter, the date is either left justified or a tab to the center, and then you can type the date. When writing to a company in the US format, you can write the date in American date format with a month written out followed by the day and the year. Here you can see two standard ways of writing the business letter. The American way, what we can say American style, your month, the date followed by the year. In British convention, there are a number of countries wherein British conventions are followed. First is the date, then the month, and then you can get the year. Here we need to understand an unwritten rule. You cannot abbreviate the name of the month like SAPT, September, and so on. That would not be seen as professional. Understand that it is used to indicate the letter date on which the letter is written. Hence, suppose for example, if your letter takes a number of days, then you need to mention the date on which the letter was finished and made. Next, we are going to look into the important aspects that it should be logically typed in an order of day, month, and year, either in a cardinal number or an ordinal number, so that it can be more readable. Such as you can write it like 24th of March 2021, 24 March 2021, March 24th 2021, and 24th of March 24th 2021. Next, moving on to the inside address. Friends, inside address is the address of the letter's recipient and is placed either on one line below the sender's address or 1 inch below the date and is always left justified. It is best to write a specific individual. So, if you don't know the person's name, call the company or talk to some employees from the company to find it out. It is essentially required. You need to include personal titles like Mr., Miss, or Doctor as required. So here the conventions are very simple. You need to avoid abbreviations of the names of the corporations or specifically the designations the people hold in. The inside address includes the essential particulars about the receiver's name, postal address, telephone number, fax, and email. If the recipient is a female, respect her with a preference to be addressed as Miss or Mrs. And if you don't know her preferences, use MS. If the person may be a doctor, so don't forget to use the specific title. Psychologically speaking, people usually do not mind being addressed by a higher title than the actual process. But if the actual title is not being given, then they may turn into anger mode. Let us see an example. So here we can see that this is a professor, and then the details are given as mentioned in the respective, we can say, the format of the inside address. Moving on to the salutation, very important part, written on the left margin. Here it is placed one line below the inside address and use the same name and the personal title, which is already used in the upper section. If you know the person and usually address them by their first name, very importantly, which can connect directly with that individual. It is acceptable to use only the first name, such as Dear Santosh. Friends, it depends on the degree of formality of the letter and the relationship with the correspondent of that individual. Basically, it's an opener, so you have to be very careful. So you can use like Dear Sir or Gentleman, which opens the letter. So here you need to be very careful. That's a caution. Coming back to the body of the letter, this is a part that really matters, as the main purpose of the business letter is to convey information besides the content, which is of great importance for the whole letter. Here you make a special effort to make the ideas understood and accepted in the most proper way to the recipient. The writer should take into consideration how to make this idea understood and accepted. Very important. In order to make it more applicable, we need to apply certain protocols, as the main part of this letter is the body of the letter, which contains information to be conveyed. Out of the 7 C's, I personally recommend to apply minimum 5 C's of communication, majorly clarity, completeness, conciseness, consistency, and courtesy. We'll see in detail how this specific C can be helpful for us to write about the content. Clarity, the first element of all the business letters, that it should be very clear. This includes the purpose of the letter and the words used within the text. You need to clearly state your point near the beginning to allow the reader in a clear understanding of the purpose of the letter. Otherwise, in the beginning, the clarity is not there, the reader may not read it further. Therefore, in order to imbibe the clarity in the content, you need to choose right words, Clear and accurate sentences are essentially required to be included. Grammatical errors are need to be avoided. There must be an unity, coherence, and emphasis on the specific aspect to be conveyed. Moving into the next C's, that is completeness and conciseness. Here, the data which you are going to include into the body of the letter must be complete so as to make it user understandable. You need to avoid extra words in a business letter. The element of conciseness refers to stating an idea in the fewest number of words possibly. Don't add superfluous information or extra words to fill the space. Simply state the information that is important and pertinent and leave it at that. As I have mentioned, better use KISS formula, that is, keep it simple and straight. Next two C's, that is consistency and courtesy. Friends, consistency matters mainly because your main objective as a business writer is to impact and engage. If you are inconsistent, you can undermine both. Therefore, inconsistency risks distracting your reader by interrupting their cognitive process when they see something unexpected. Hence, the consistency is essentially be a part of business letter. It is required that the business letter should show respect to the reader and should demonstrate the writer's personal respect for the reader and the company he or she works for. That is essentially required, and that can be achieved by using the next C, that is courtesy. Coming back to the next aspect, complementary closure. Here we know that customary expressions to be used like to close the business letter include thank you, sincerely, sincerely yours, and truly yours, etc. But it's also expected to use less formal expressions such as regards, best wishes, only when the writer is addressing a business associate. Even if that business associate is your friend, then also you need to have a professional approach there that the business purpose can be achieved. Some of the examples here shown for the complementary closure. Next, the signature line. It is necessary to end the letter properly. While ending a formal letter, it is important to convey the appropriate amount of respect to the person receiving the letter. For example, you should have a different, more conservative complementary closure for an unknown recipient than you would for a business associate which you know quite well. Your closing and signature should be as professional as the rest of your letter. And unsigned notations, as you can see, identification initials, enclosure, carbon copy, blind copy, and a postscript. The enclosure notations goes near the bottom of the letter, 3 lines below your signature, or 1 line below the typist's initials, in case of a regular business letter. The sender's address, date, recipient's address, salutation, body, and closing signature all come before the enclosure notation. The first notation is identification initials. These are the initials of the writer or a director and the typist or a transcriber. Usually, the sender's initials are capitalized and the typists are in the lowercase, which you can see in the image. Enclosures. An enclosure is an additional standalone document that you include in a business letter as needed. You do not have to explain this document purpose in this business letter. The recipient should be able to understand what is without having to read the letter. When you are citing an enclosure, put the citation in the parenthesis. You can use an ENC or enclosure. Moving to the next, carbon copy, or it is also known as CC. It is one of the versatile business letter elements with this feature, you can make sure all the interested parties get a copy of an important letter. And you can also keep your own files updated at all the times. The term carbon copy refers to the old paper method of making copies. That's what we call it as Xerox, or the copier, to make it more popular. Next is the blind copy. This feature will prevent long chains of people replying, that's called as BCC, when it isn't required that everyone receive all the responses and is not reflected on the original letter. That is, if the writer decides to give a copy of the letter to a person not referred in the address, he can mention it as BCC. Postscript. Friends, postscript is a feature, no doubt, but it should be avoided because a postscript is useful if the writer wishes to emphasize some point in the letter, or if a point worthy of mention arises after the letter is being written. The use of postscript percolates the need of to rewrite the letter, or it can also showcase the unplanned letter. So therefore, it is essentially required that you should avoid it. Even if it is required, you can use it with the symbol PS. There are 7 different optional elements. As and when it is required, you can use like attention line, subject line, file or account number, enclosures, carbon copy notations, which we have seen, mailing notations, postscripts. Attention line is essentially required as it is considered as a part of inside address. It leads to the letter to a particular person, which we have seen. Usually attention to the department. For example, you can say Mr. Santosh, sales manager, which talks about the designation of that particular individual with that specific name. One more example is there, Nihal, the general manager. Subject line is regarded as a part of the business letter, usually in the uppercase or an initial capital underline, placed between the salutation and the body of the letter to call attention to what content the letter is all about. This is an indicator. Next is file or account number. It is indicated near the date or about the inside name and address so as to facilitate the writer's numbering and filing the letters he receives, and enable the writer or the recipient to link the reply with the previous correspondence. Because correspondence is a longer process consisting of various phases and stages, so maintaining the records of lineup is essentially required, which can be achieved with this help of account number or file number. Enclosures, which we are seeing now, carbon copy notations, which we have already seen. If it is to be followed and given to the number of recipients, we can use the carbon copy. Next, coming back to the mailing notation. Mailing notations are made up of the initials of the person who dictates the letter and of the secretary or to the typist. The initials are usually typed 2-line spacing below the signature against the left hand margin. Postscript, which already is being given to you, should be avoided. Friends, along with these all, there are certain writing rules for a business letter. Most importantly, in communication in the modern days, they are written for information exchange and bridge over the desires between the buyers and sellers or between the two business entities. Generally speaking, the most effective letter should be abide by the following rules, like clearness, conciseness, courtesy. Clarity. Keep constantly in mind that what you want to say should be clear. Express yourself clearly and directly in the simplest language. Plain and simple words are more easily understood. A properly paragraphed message is required for the purpose of clarity. Conciseness. It means it is the briefest expression with not sacrificing the clarity or courtesy. A good business letter should be precise and to the point, and usage of efficient phrases are essentially required. Worldly languages and redundancy require more time and money to type and read it. Very importantly, courtesy means to show tactfully in your letter the honest friendship, thoughtful appreciation, sincere politeness, and considerate understanding and heartfelt respect. Answer the letters in a good time and write to explain why if you fail to do it promptly. Even if you don't think the recipient is right, you should still respond tactfully and politely. Sometimes it helps to use your attitude as you attitude instead of I attitude. There are certain tips, friends. Keep the content of the letter relevant and to the point. Ensure the letter is well presented. Ensure your spelling and grammar are perfect. Keep the tone up in a polite manner. Make sure that the letter has a good structure from the beginning till the finishing paragraph. Let us have a quick review. Business letters should be clear and jargon should be avoided. Before sending the letter, read it aloud to make sure it's understandable and that you have covered all your points. Whether you're writing to a potential employer, a client, or a business associate, it's important to check for grammar, mistakes, and typographical errors. It's critical to spell the recipient's name correctly and to use his or her proper title. Double check the recipient's mailing address to avoid a delivery delay. The upcoming video is on types of business letters. For any further details and any doubts, you can communicate with me at my number 821-766-6689.